TCU improved their defensive line over the weekend by adding Ansel Din Mbuh from Washington State. We'll talk about that transfer next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can bet on NFL games live on the FanDuel app or FanDuel.com. I'll tell you about them later on in the show. We're talking transfer portal. It's that time of year. TCU added some talent over the weekend. They did get a commit, actually a signee, from Ansel Din Mbuh from Washington State, who's originally from Aledo. Sonny Dykes has done a really good job through the years, both at SMU and now at TCU, of knowing who from the DFW area, where do they go, where do they end up, and then if and when they hit the transfer portal, connecting with them quickly, getting them back in the fold, bringing them home. They did that this past season on the defensive line with Nana Mensah from Notre Dame. This year, Ansel Din Mbuh was quickly somebody they zeroed in on. As far as I can tell, he only took one visit to get him in-house. And the interesting thing about him as a player, as a prospect, coming over from Washington State, interior defensive lineman, but has an knack for rushing the passer, which is not something you typically see from that position. 6'3", 291 pounds, 6 sacks last year. Had a game at San Diego State this season where he had 3 sacks, a game against Hawaii where he had 1.5. So able to get after the passer, which if you can do that from the 3 technique, the 1 technique, that means outside shoulder of the guard or inside shoulder of the guard. That's a big plus. And that's something that TCU needs more of. Marcus Deal was fantastic this past season. I like what he brings to the table. There's some other young guys that I love on the D-line. Connor Lindgren did some good things. Zach Chapman, somebody I want to see get more snaps. Travis Jackson played a lot as a true freshman. So all that's positive, but you're losing a lot of experience with Caleb Fox, Simon Mitchell, Nana also moving on. So you need more depth, and this is a guy that I think could be a day one starter potentially, depending on how things go in spring practice, has that ability to rush the passer, which is really good. And the Frogs have done a nice job, I think, over the past few recruiting cycles of building this defensive line to a place where they're going to have some beef up there and some dudes that they can really rotate in and out and not see a huge drop-off in the quality of play. In the middle, this was a problem last season at times, stopping the run. Now, I know part of that, too, is your run fits from your linebackers and your safeties, but having players that can take up space, take on blocks, take on double teams, and hold their own and allow those guys in the back end to come down and make plays is a big deal. So, nice pickup by TCU. Ansel's got great size, almost 300 pounds, over 6 feet tall, and they've added a few JUCO players as well. Perry Cole seems to project more as a defensive tackle, even though he played a little bit inside and outside at his junior college stop. And then Kelton Mickle, who was a very good pass rusher at Jones College in Mississippi. So you're talking about adding 3 players along the defensive line that can make things happen. Now, the one thing I've noticed about all these guys so far that they've added, they seem to be more in the mold of athletic pass rusher types, which is awesome. You need those players. I am wondering if they bring in one more kind of run stuffer dude in the middle. They've gotten away from, I think Dominic Williams, don't get me wrong, Dominic Williams would have been great to have this past year. I'm not like saying that they didn't miss him. They obviously did. But Dom is more your prototypical 3-3-5. If you're going to have 3 down linemen, you need somebody in the middle with great size and the ability to take on double teams, not allow guys to reestablish line of scrimmage and shove you back. He's that type of dude. They've gotten away from that type of defense, and so they have an emphasis on more athletic players who can win one-on-one pass rushing matchups. But I think they could use some more beef in the middle. And one offer that they threw out over the weekend, and this player put it out on social media, Dominic Ratcliffe from Texas State 6'3", 285 pounds. He's from Conroe originally, so from the Houston area. This past season had 22 tackles, 10 solo tackles, and 2 sacks. So the stats don't jump off the page, but he's more in the mold of what you see from your typical D lineman in the interior, and that this isn't a dude that will get 3 or 4 sacks in a ball game, but he's got a job. It's about gap integrity. It's about making sure that you're not getting blown off the line of scrimmage and you're allowing other players to make a lot of those plays. So we'll see if they zero in on Ratliff. But as far as Ansel Din Mbuh goes, I mean, coming out of Lido, wasn't super highly recruited by Power 4 schools, but ends up at Wazoo, which at the time he committed was still in the Pac-12 in its formation, its current form, or its old formation. And really, I mean, he played right away. In 2023, he got some run, and then this past season started every game and was super effective, getting off the ball, making plays, enrolled early and appeared in 10 games as a freshman. So made an immediate impact, has experience working his way into a system, working his way into a D-line rotation. I saw Landry Burnine, who knows the Lido area well because his sons play there, say that he loves this kid. He loves who he is as a person. Good culture fit. It feels like that's an emphasis for this team. They're being pretty selective on who they offer, what they're going after. I think we're talking about in 2025 the top of this development cycle. In a lot of these areas, you're getting to a place where the roster is pretty well filled out, and now it's about, okay, where do we find help for specific needs? We're not rebuilding the entire offensive line anymore. We're just taking on maybe a tackle or two. We're not rebuilding the entire defensive line. We added some help from the JUCO ranks. We got a guy in Ansel who can come in and play. Maybe you go get a pass rusher or two. You're reworking your safety group a little bit because of some transfers. But there's and receiver, you're losing a ton of production. Receiver might be the one where you're really making a wholesale change, but that's a spot where you've been really successful lately. So you feel pretty good about the pitch that you're making to different players and what the coaching staff can do with those guys when they go on campus. So you have to be careful about, okay, who are we bringing in? What are we doing? How are they going to fit in with this roster that has been together now for a few seasons? And Din Mbuh seems like the type of guy that should seamlessly be able to get here, do what he needs to do on off the field. And having ties here should really help when it comes to adjusting and making it happen in a new program. Over the weekend, a listener named Mando Bull reached out to me, and he was frustrated. He was like, hey, we don't have any commits yet. Now, a slight adjustment now, you got one. But at the time, nobody committed. What's the holdup? Is it not having an athletic director? Is it something with our recruiting pitch? And here's what I'd say to that. It kind of goes off what I was just talking about. And I know it's easy to get restless. You look at what Tech's doing right now. I think Cody Campbell is the name of one of their big boosters he's motivated. He's shelling out cash, and they're adding a lot of talent. Iowa State went and got Chase Sowell, who was one of those targets that TCU has out there. And really, he's the only one that they've offered and pursued, to my knowledge, that has gone elsewhere. So it's not like you're seeing a bunch of guys they've recruited committing elsewhere. Now, I did see Deshaun Stribling, who I would really love to have, receiver at Oklahoma State, who had almost 900 yards last year. He's going on some other visits. So it looks like they weren't able to get him fully locked in when he was here, which was disappointing. But I'm not trying to pump sunshine here. I would just say it feels like this is an offseason where TCU's not going to go get 17 transfers. I think we're talking about maybe 10 to 12. And the JUCO guys count. So I guess right now you got 3, but they signed with the high school class. And it's more about, hey, let's add to specific areas of the team. Because you're running it back with the QB. It seems like for the most part, you're going to run it back with your running back room, your O-line, your corners. I think they'll take a linebacker or two, but I don't feel like you're going to see the change that you've seen the last couple off seasons as they've tried to kind of replenish some different assets and features of this roster in the post-Gary Patterson era. So I wouldn't get super concerned yet. Now, receiver is a place where you need a lot of help. So you'd like to see some good news come in there. But by and large, I think they're doing a good job. And if I were them, I would be more aggressive with going and getting a tackle. I don't think this O-line's horrible. I think there's things they do well. They're very good in pass protection. And it feels like they're willing to go get somebody if it's at the right price. Howard Sampson at UNC, haven't heard anything since that initial report that there was some mutual interest there. He's going to be highly sought after. If you want a good tackle, if you want a good, solid guy on the edge of your offensive line, it's going to cost you. And it feels like the way TCU's approaching it, it's like, hey, if it's the right price and it makes sense, we'll go get somebody. But if not, we feel pretty good about what we have. I would have more urgency if I was them, but that's their perspective, and we'll see if it pays off for them. I think they have urgency at the wide receiver spot, and they've already made some waves on the defensive line. That seems to be their main three priorities, and I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the action. Now, one offer that did go out, or at least somebody that they're looking at, Jeremy Clark reported this over the weekend, Kavorian Barnes, running back from UTSA. And Kavorian's had some good seasons in his career. In 2022, he ran for 851 yards on about 6.5 yards per carry. In 2023, he ran for 715 yards. But this past season, 78 carries for 221 and a couple touchdowns. And it wasn't like he had an injury-riddled season unless it was something that was underreported. I mean, he played in every game, and a lot of these games had double-digit carries. His best week was against Houston Christian, where he had 12 carries for 64 yards. I mean, a lot of like 8 for 32, 10 for 22, 10 for 27, 10 for 16. So, pretty big dip in production this past year. I'm not really getting that. I mean, I guess it's, hey, we're taking a chance on a guy who has done some nice things in the past, and we feel pretty good about our current makeup, the running back room. So if it doesn't work, it's not a huge deal. And I mean, I hope it works out for him. I'm very curious as to what they see there, other than he's 210 pounds, so kind of a change of pace guy for sure. And TCU right now has more like quick slot wide receiver type running backs, if that makes sense. So you're going to need somebody in short yardage situations, but that's another name to know. Kavorian Barnes out there with TCU, at least talking about the possibility of linking up this offseason. So we'll have plenty of transfer portal coverage the rest of the week, but Ansel Din Mbuh from Washington State and originally from Aledo, he is signed. He is going to be a Frog. And 6 sacks this past season, has that ability to rush the passer from the interior. When we come back, some just brutal news for TCU basketball on the men's side. The women, they get back on track with a victory after a tough loss to South Carolina. We'll break that down next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Time to talk to you about one of our great sponsors, FanDuel. FanDuel is where the game starts. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app, they make it easy for you. You can live bet on NFL games if you like. You can bet on NBA, NHL, college football, college basketball. It's all available for you on the FanDuel app or at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NFL. You hit on one $5 bet, You get $150 in bonus bets. Again, one $5 bet. You hit on that, you get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. So, some news that came down Friday afternoon. TCU basketball was off. Both teams were. Finals week, getting semester wrapped up. Frankie Collins, who Frogs point guard, leads the team in points per game, assists per game, steals per game, has been the team's best player through the first month of the season. Hasn't been the best first month of the year. They've lost 4 games. They've had some issues. But Frankie's their dude. I mean, he's the guy, if you need a bucket, he goes and gets one. Good defensive player. He came in as sort of like a true point guard type. That was his role in the past. Thought that's what he could do. And he does that well, but he also was somebody who could go get you a bucket if you needed it. He's out for the season with a stress fracture in his foot. Just brutal news for this team. A team that was already struggling, and you lose one of the bright spots on what's been a rough start to the year. Frogs play South Alabama tonight, and then they get Montana State later this week. Then conference play starts, and they match up with Arizona to begin Big 12 play. You got 20 conference games. It looks pretty bleak right now. I don't remember. I mean, I watched the Vandy game live in the second half. I missed the first half because of church. I went back and rewatched it later. I don't really remember him falling awkwardly or anything like that. So it's strange that this would come out. Now, he can apparently medically redshirt and potentially come back next season, which would be great to see if it happens. A couple people mentioned this when I put out the news, or I guess I retweeted the news. I didn't put the news out. But a couple people mentioned it's time to see the young guys, and I'd agree with that. Now, I don't think you'll see a wholesale change immediately because, I mean, you got to play this out and see, okay, how do we recover? How do we respond after getting some tough news? But especially if you get out to a rough start in conference play, I mean, let Ashton Simmons get out there and see what he can do, true freshman. Let R.J. Jones, the transfer from Kansas State, who's known as a scorer, let him get out there and see what he can do. Give me more Micah Robinson. Give me more David Punch. Now, for one thing, it's just like if you're going to be at a disadvantage in most of these games and it's going to be a struggle to win, just give those guys valuable experience. Also, if you end up having a rough season, the reality is you need to do that to protect against dudes hitting the transfer portal. Like, make sure they know they're valued here, that they're going to get playing time, that they're part of the future, and see where it gets you. Chase Posey, Isaiah Manning, like, there needs to be a youth movement throughout the rest of the season. And I hate this for Frankie. I know he's excited about this year. He's playing really well. Felt like he was in a very comfortable situation, doing a great job, and just season kind of gets upended with him or on him with this injury. So hopefully he can recover and be ready to rock and roll next year. But just tough news for a team that was already struggling. You lose your best player. It's not ideal. On the women's side, they bounced back and beat Louisiana Tech this afternoon, 92-41. Haley Van Lith led the way with 23 points. She was super efficient, 7 of 10 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. Madison Connor was great off the bench, had 18 points. Sedona Prince looked more like herself with 12 points. She did leave the game at some point after setting a screen. Looked like she got the wind knocked out of her maybe, and just out of precaution, they said, okay, let's make sure you're good to go. Because they are also starting conference play soon. They play Samford on Tuesday, and then UCF the 21st. Got a game with Brown sandwiched in between UCF and Colorado, but Big 12 play is going to start soon for them as well. And even with the loss to South Carolina, I feel like this is a team that can win this conference. which is super exciting. I mean, it's crazy how quickly Mark Campbell's turned this thing around and got momentum moving in the right direction. But Prince and Van Lith are fantastic. Madison Connor's a great scorer off the bench or as a starter. Big B has been good for them. Donovan Hunter got back in a rhythm scoring the basketball this afternoon, which was good to see. It feels like they're firing on all cylinders. South Carolina, just another level. And like I said, I don't know how they lost to UCLA, but kudos to UCLA for hanging in there and winning that ball game because that's an impressive team. They're long, they're athletic, and yeah, they were ready to rock and roll against a TCU team that was coming in with a ton of momentum after beating NC State and taking down Notre Dame in that tournament in the Cayman Islands. But really nice bounce back from Mark Campbell's squad as they had no trouble with Louisiana Tech, didn't sleepwalk through it, just took care of business, 192-41, and we'll get ready for a game again on Tuesday before starting conference play. When we come back, I'll get some of your thoughts from Friday's show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. College football playoff is coming up. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with a newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement you love. TNT sports coverage of college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading to our first matchup, SMU battling Penn State at noon. Then Clemson looks up to the Texas Longhorns in the showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and HBO Max. So on Friday's show, I talked about trying to land Oklahoma State wide receiver Dejon Stribling in the transfer portal. TCU also been in communication with Joseph Manjack, wide receiver from Houston. Tanner McKinney says Eric McAllister definitely will be the seventh wide receiver to break 1,000 yards. He is good. I really hope Josh and Eric click next season. I'm also excited to see Jakyle Baker. I think it could be big. Yeah, Jakyle, hopefully he comes through in a big way. 4-star recruit. Didn't see the field this season, but there was a ton of talent at that spot. There will be ample opportunity for him, Braylon James, Duzi Azukama, the transfers as well. A lot of guys that can step up and try to replace the great seasons that Jack Besh, Savion Williams, J.P. Richardson had. And this is a team that is not afraid to throw the ball and spread people out. And Josh Hoover is somebody who uses everybody on the field. So ample opportunity for some new blood there at the receiver spot. I'm excited for Eric McAllister as well. Anthony Howard says the offense needs balance. With that said, adding a physical running back would be nice. And maybe that's what they're doing with Kavorian Barnes. I wouldn't be opposed to adding a short yardage guy, a physical back. You got to get better on the run game this next year, and you're not going to have Savion Williams to save you in doing that. So need to find a way to have some balance along with a dynamic every down back, whether that ends up being Cam Cook or Jeremy Payne. They'll battle out in the spring and fall, and we'll see what happens. But, yes, that's a spot where you got to improve. And in general, have to be able to run the ball, have more balance. And that's going to take pressure off Josh Hoover, who already had a really good season, but that'll allow him to do some things and Kendall Browse do something in the passing game they haven't been able to do the last few years just because they don't have a threat running the ball. Frog fan says, rumor is that Ewers might transfer out of Texas to go to UNC to get ready for the NFL. If he does, this feels like the Colorado game, big name transfers, and a popular coach opening the season. I haven't heard that, but, I mean, I know UNC is going to be chasing after talent, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys that would be excited to play for Bill Belichick. So, yeah, I think the team's going to be solid, and, TCU's going to have to lean on that experience and just having a team that's been together for a while. Hopefully that's a big advantage for them. Sam Morgan said this would be the greatest addition in TCU history. Maybe they should just hand the national title to TCU now. I always love the sincerity of Sam's comments. That's my favorite thing about him. He just believes what he says. loves listening to the pod and loves being so supportive of TCU athletics. Thank you, Sam. And Vince asked me if I drank a Red Bull. I don't think so. I know I didn't because I don't drink energy drinks. But yeah, I was excited on Friday. Chance to close the week. I'd close the week strong. Hopefully we started the week strong today. I'll talk to you tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.